Hello from Jeffco PTA. This is Shauna, and we are here to offer you this amazing presentation, Coping Strategies with Casey. Casey Gardner is a social emotional learning specialist for the PTA.
Counselor.
Counselor, thank you. So she's a social worker. So she works here in Jeffco schools, and she is an amazing, amazing person. I always feel uplifted after talking to Casey. And I asked Casey to be on the Jeffco PTA Board of Directors because mental health is one of our priorities for this term. And Casey is definitely gifted in this field and this category. And she's kind of a child whisperer. So I hope that she can help you and help as much as she has helped me over the years. I've known her for years and years. And Casey, thank you for giving your time over break. We so appreciate you. You know how much I love you. So I'm just going to hand it off to you and you take it away.
All right, well, I'm going to share my screen and we'll get started. Oops. Right. Okay, so present mode. There we go. All right, can everyone see the screen? Okay, so our goal for today is that we talk about some of the strategies that we teach kids so that you see less of the left and more of the kiddo on the right. But I don't think at this point in life we can talk about coping strategies without talking about the fact that we are dealing with a universal trauma right now. And so there are things that are going on with brains that are affected by trauma. And so this is from a trauma specialist. I am not a trauma specialist, but part of our brains have shut down in order for us to survive because there's only so much our brain can do. So we're not able to fully process a lot of what's going on around us. And this is true for our kids too. Feeling somewhat numb and out of touch with our emotions is normal, especially for those people who've had trauma before. Some of us are more apt to be, more hypervigilant. Somebody's in the waiting room, Shauna. More hypervigilant or anxious, while others become more hypoactive or depressed. There's nothing wrong with either of them. It's just how we tend to process stress ourselves. In-depth processing of trauma will happen later when we feel emotionally safe to deal with it. And kids who have trauma, they tend to, as they go through those cognitive development stages where they can think about things indifferently, it's really normal for them to reprocess traumas. So if your child has had trauma, expect those to come up with puberty and at 20, 22 in that age. But when we're in the midst of trauma, just getting by emotionally and functionally is okay. And it's okay to lower expectations and just be kind to ourselves because there is so much going on. We have got to take care of ourselves and our kids. I get really frustrated when I hear, oh, we're all in the same boat, because we're not. Some of us have yachts and some are in, rowboats that are drowning, or they don't have anything. So we might all be in the same storm with COVID and everything that's come with it. But some people definitely have it a lot harder. I'm very thankful. I have a job, I have a house, I have critters, I can feed them. So it is a very different experience for a lot of people. One of my schools is a title school. Those kids are dealing with very different issues than my kids at another school. I love this Berenstein Bear image because most kids who aren't dealing with trauma tend to see the world on the left. People look friendly, people are safe. Right now, a lot of us are viewing the world on the right, and we're a little more mistrustful. I know when I go to the grocery store and I see people not following the rules, I feel a little grumbly and unsafe and unsure, and it's definitely affects us. So our kids are having a hard time focusing. We're having a hard time focusing. It's taking us twice as long to do anything. A lot of us have been consumed with ensuring that you have the right stuff to sustain your physiological needs. We might be more irritable, looking for more connections, feeling overwhelmed. I know I have been physically exhausted, even just working from home, sitting in front of a computer all day, which I hate. It's exhausting. This next one is kids. Oh, wait, there's something due, because their executive function skills that aren't there till you're about 35 are really being taxed with the home learning. The idea of planning for the future is the furthest thing from their minds, our minds. We only have enough mental energy to focus on the immediate, and we have to prioritize self-care and family. And we want to control everything that is controllable because things are so unpredictable right now. And if you're familiar with Maslow's hierarchy of needs, we're right here between physiological and safety. Up here is self-actualization, but this is also where learning takes place. So you can see why kids are getting a little bit behind right now, because right now we're here. And so we'll catch them up. It's going to be okay. But there's a lot of stress right now for everybody. And you guys are trying to do your jobs plus educate your kids at home and support them. And it's really hard. And we need to acknowledge that it's hard. And people are doing amazing. I have two professional idols. One of them is Dr. Ross Greene. He wrote The Explosive Child and the book Lost at School. And I love this quote from him: kids do well when they can. When they're not doing well, it's a skill deficit. It's not that they're waking up and saying, how can I be a booger today? It's they don't have the skills. And so we have to give them the skills. So we spend a lot of time, all these things that I'm going to share with you are things that I teach the kids that I work with. And so here is a video that we show kids, and hopefully, I think I hit share the sound. So we'll see.
The more you understand how your brain works and how thoughts and emotions interact, the more control you can have over your thoughts and emotions. It's your brain. It's time for you to start controlling your own thoughts and emotions. So let's talk about how thoughts and feelings interact. We're going to break it down using a visual, the hand model. We're going to use our hand for this. Your thumb, folding it in, is the middle of your brain, your amygdala. Your fingertips, folding it around, is your prefrontal cortex, the front of your brain. We'll come back to this in a second. Our amygdala is really important in serious situations. For example, if you see a fire, it alerts you into action. It cuts off access to your prefrontal cortex, where you think and reason, which is great. You don't need to calculate just how long it will take for the house to burn down. You just need to move. Back to your hand. Your amygdala in the center, with the fingers curled around, flips the prefrontal cortex lid. Flip the lid. Try it with me. Put your thumb in the middle, hold your fingertips, and force your fingertips over with your thumb, the amygdala. This could save your life in the fire situation. So we need our amygdala, but here's the problem. Your amygdala makes mountains out of molehills. So when there isn't a fire, and just say a pop quiz, your amygdala may react the same and flip your lid when there's no need to. When your lid is flipped, that's when your thoughts and emotions become muddled. When this happens, it means your thoughts are driven by your amygdala, and they are often distorted. This can fuel your worry or anxiety. So your lid is still flipped, and you need your prefrontal cortex to perform well on that pop quiz. So you have to find a way to get the prefrontal cortex to come down so you can think and reason. Bringing your lid down is tough for all of us. We'll dive further into that next.
Okay. So we talk a lot with kids about what does it mean to flip your lid? Because this is what we know. Kids never choose to have a meltdown. And there is a big difference between a meltdown and a tantrum. But when they have a meltdown or any anxiety related behavior, they never want that. It's not something they're seeking. They're not trying to control you. Tantrums, yes. Just like we would never do that. We would never fall apart if we could help it in front of people. So we really, when someone's having a meltdown, we have to give them a lot of compassion, a lot of love, never punishment, fear, shame, any of those things, because this is not something that they're seeking. And again, tantrums and meltdowns are very, very different things. You could make an iceberg like this with any feeling at the top, but I love this graphic because what we see is often very, very different than what is fueling the behavior. And so if we're only dealing with the behavior that we're seeing, we're going to miss what's going on and not be effective in treating it. I worked for many, many years in an SED program. I think they're called affective needs now, but it's for kids who have significant social and emotional challenges. And what they show you is often very, very different. So beneath every behavior, there's a feeling, and beneath each feeling is a need. And when we meet the need rather than focus on behavior, we begin to deal with the cause and not the symptom. So years ago, gosh, he's probably a high school kiddo, but I had a kiddo in my SED program that when anyone started escalating, he would start swearing really, really loudly, throwing around the F-bomb. Sometimes he'd throw things literally as well, books and stuff, but he always did it while hiding underneath the table. And it took a little while because there's a lot of shame when your kids had trauma. The mom didn't want to tell us how abused this kid had been from a boyfriend of hers. And it was pretty clear pretty quickly that this kid had been highly traumatized. So with the other kids escalating felt really unsafe. And so if I was only dealing with the swearing and not the fact that he didn't feel safe, then I would have completely missed the boat on how to help him. So instead, we had to give him strategies for when this kid's escalating, how can you feel safe so that you can maintain your behavior? And so back to this here, if I had only looked at the angry and not at the fear, he was scared and overwhelmed. So you have to really remember that there is a lot going on behind what we see. So calming strategies. The first one that we always start with kids is breathing, because our lungs are always with us. And so here are some of the ones that we do, and I'll let you know kind of the younger kids versus the older kids, but they all also work for us. I do the square breathing all the time. And what's not on the graphics are places where we stop and just hold our breath. But the whole focus is that we have to slow our breathing down when we're escalated. And so we teach kids that as well. So the hot cocoa breathing, the kindergartners and the first graders love this because it's hot chocolate. So we just simply hold our hands like we have a cup of hot cocoa, and we always breathe in through our nose and out through our mouth. So we're breathing in, then hold it, and then blowing out. So we're breathing in the smell of chocolate and we're cooling it down. And then we just keep repeating. So that's one the little kids like. This one, similar thing. We smell the flower and blow out the birthday candle or the regular candle. Kids like birthday candles. This 5-finger breathing is great for your kinesthetic kids. And I see even, I work in elementary now, although I've worked all K-12. At the top of each finger, we stop and have them hold their breath. So literally you just take your thumb or your finger down here at the bottom of your thumb, and we go up, breathing in, hold it, and I have them hold it again. And then we check in with the kids. How did they feel before? How are they feeling now? Do they need to do it again? Sometimes they need to do it several times. We used to have a couple chairs that were in the shape of a hand with fingers. And I looked over one day and I saw a first grader doing 5-finger breathing on the chair. And I was like, "Are you okay?" He goes, "I'm really nervous. We're having a quiz, so I'm doing big breathing today." So, and he did great on the quiz, but I thought it was really cute. So kids who are very tactile, who like to touch, they love this breathing exercise. This one is great because it combines brain gym, which is these 26 different exercises that integrate the different parts of our brain, along with a breathing strategy. And it helps with crossing the midline. And so the midline is just that imaginary line down the center of your body. And it's a developmental task for kids to be able to do things on the opposite side. And it relates to academics with writing, self-regulation, all sorts of important skills. And so let me move my computer back. So we just have them put their hands out and focus on their thumb. And we start over here and we're just breathing in. And then hold. And then so we're drawing an 8 on its side, which is where the lazy comes because it's too lazy to stand up. And they can do that several times. But that crossing the midline is really, really helpful for some kids, especially those that struggle with physical stuff or working with an OT. This is one that I do all the time, and my high school kids loved it. I do it on my leg. I just draw it on my leg. Kids can draw it on their desk. Sometimes we'll just put a little rectangle on their desk to give them something to remind them. But we just start, go up 4 seconds, hold for 4 seconds, exhale for 4 seconds, hold for 4 seconds, and then just do that a few times. And so the older kids really like this, but because you can do, they don't want to look different. And so, with the 5-finger breathing, yes, you can do it under your desk, but most of the kids do it up here and people know what they're doing. This gives them a little more privacy. So as they become a little more self-conscious, which is normal for teenagers, it gives them a way to use their strategies without getting overwhelmed with, what are you doing? Why are you doing that? What are you worried about? And just lets them have that private chance to calm themselves down. A lot of test anxiety, I teach kids to go in, do these breathing exercises, close their eyes, see themselves getting their test back with a grade that they like, and just get mentally prepared for taking the test or performing in the spelling bee or in the play or whatever it is. But this one, the older kids, late elementary all the way up to my high school kids, really like this one. So I recently saw this meme that I couldn't figure out how to, for some reason I couldn't copy it. And I'm pretty good about doing that, so I don't know why. But you all know that when you've got a kid who's hangry and you say, "Oh, honey, you just need a snack," if you tell them what they need, they often will say, "No." So the snack might really help them, and they're not going to have a snack because you told them to have a snack, because they're dysregulated, their lids are flipped, they're not going to get there. So what I really liked about this is just, I wonder how it would feel if we just took a sip of water together. So just very gentle. We know that hydration helps with lowering anxiety, helps you to feel calmer. We don't feel thirst until we are already dehydrated. So this is and kids, especially now, because the water fountains aren't available, they have water bottles. And so this is something that I tried it right before we went remote, because elementaries were full-time until Thanksgiving, although one of my schools didn't make it, but the other one did. but it was like, maybe let's just try having a drink of water. And it really worked. And I actually used it with a kid who is my hangry kid that needs a snack, but when her lid is flipped, she won't have a snack. We've really worked on that, but this works really well, and it's very gentle, and it's not you have to do it. It's just I wonder how it would feel. And so the gentleness of it sometimes makes them more willing to try. Eileen Hunter Sweeney is a retired social worker in the district and a very good friend of mine and a good friend of Shauna's and maybe some of the rest of you. But I love this quote: "A dysregulated adult will never help regulate a dysregulated child." So one, these strategies will work for us too. But two, we have to remember that when we're around kids who are struggling, we have to start with checking ourselves. I know working in SED, my main job is to first keep kids safe. And we were being assaulted, spit on, kids were being threatened, sometimes assaulted. It's really can create an emotional storm. And so a lot of times what we had to do was say, I need a Coke, which I don't drink Coke, but that was our code word for I need to take a little break and calm myself down so that I can be effective with these kids. And it's really important. And it's hard when you're a single parent, because if you don't have anyone to tap out with, it's really difficult to be able to calm yourself down. So finding someone who can help you with those things is really important. But I love this graphic because we all hope that we live in an environment like on the left. But I know that most of us, at least at times, live in a swirling storm. And if we can use our own strategies and calm ourselves down, we're going to be able to help our kids and things are going to feel much calmer. And so that's one place that I always start when a kid is struggling. It's, am I part of the chaos? Because chaos breeds chaos. And so if I'm escalated, I'm not going to help the situation and I need to use some strategies. So these are really great strategies if they're true. If the kid's in trouble, don't tell them they're not in trouble. But if they're not in trouble, they always feel like, oh, I screwed up, you hate me. Let them know these things. You think it's obvious because you've told them before, but when their lids are flipped, they're not accessing that prefrontal cortex. And they just assume that the world is ending, you hate them, you're never going to like them again. So these kind of things, when they're true, are very helpful. I always, even when kids get in fights at school, yeah, you're in some trouble, but I still care about you. I'm not mad at you. I want to help you, and we'll work through the consequences. So it's helping them to realize that they're not losing the relationship that they have with the adults because they made a big mistake. But these are really nice things to say to kids when they're true. Kids have so many worries right now. I mean, I'm so impressed with the kids that I work with and the kids that I know because they're doing amazing despite all the weirdness. Before March, I hadn't used Zoom. And the kids are able to navigate technical problems. They're giving each other strategies. They're helping each other. Oh, let's do this. And oh, let's go do this breakout room. We can do this together. The kids have a lot of worries, but they're amazing too. So we have to look at their resilience. But there are a lot of worries. And a lot of kids, they're not able to see grandparents and people. Shauna, you want to say something?
I do actually. We had a question here, and I can say this exact same thing. So this is from an elementary parent, but I've got a high schooler too. What if you tell your child that that you're not mad at them, and they're not in trouble, but they won't believe you? So and yeah, this is the same for me in secondary as it is for elementary.
And, I think one of those things is When I worked in the SED program, I said this all the time. I know you don't believe me right now, but I'm going to show you that this is true. And they, they don't believe us because it's in them. And so I think it's okay to just acknowledge that you're struggling and you don't believe that I love you no matter what. And I use those words. I tell my students that I love them. And I show them. So I think it's okay. It's okay to acknowledge that kids don't believe you. And a lot of time it's an internal thing. And so does that kind of answer the question? I mean, you can't make them believe you. You can just help them. You can acknowledge the reality and help them to see that, and when they're calmed down and when their lid's no longer flipped, you could say, I know you thought you were in trouble. Were you in trouble?
Right. And actually, she said, yes, you did. And she's taking notes, as we all have multiple times over the years with your amazing wisdom. So you are a tremendous help.
Good, good. All right. I love this. A lot of us have kids with anxiety. I work with gifted kids now, so anxiety is kind of part of their DNA, it seems. But it says, oh, good grief, these tights are too tight. I think I'm going to die. Able to jump to the worst conclusion in a single bound. So we know our kids, we know who is more prone to anxiety, but even our really average, bare, easygoing kids are showing a lot of anxiety right now. And just being aware and talking with them about all the changes, why we're doing what we're doing, why things are the way that they are. Even little kids, I have a great nephew who's just turned 4. He's able to understand all of it, at a 4-year-old level. Obviously, he's not understanding it at a high school level because he's 4. But he wears a mask. He's fine. He tells people. Apparently, a couple weeks ago in the grocery store, he out loud said, "Mommy, doesn't she know her nose holes are part of her breathing? And why isn't her mask pulled up?" And like totally loud. Some people laughed. The person whose mask had fallen down was, gave him a crusty look and walk away. But, kids get it. But there are times that what they're having is not something that we're able to deal with ourselves. And so if it's affecting your kids, their typical behavior is really different, it may be time to talk to your pediatrician and just start the conversations, because there is a lot going on right now. And, if they're not sleeping, then it's going to impact everything else going on in the world. If they're not doing the activities that they enjoy, and finding safe ways to be, we may need to do more. These coping strategies aren't going to be enough. So at some point you might want to consult with your doctor, and that's totally your call. You know your kid best. But just know that that's okay. There's no, I grew up with a very depressed and anxious mom. And she was part of, I usually put, when I'm talking with adults, an F-bomb in front of it, but the bootstrap generation, which I think is so, here comes Tess, so unhelpful. You know, if if there's something biochemical going on with you, you can't pull yourself up by your bootstraps. It's not going to help you or anyone else. It's just going to make life harder. So it might be that you need to talk to someone, and that's okay. There should be no shame in there. This is an activity that I learned a few years ago that I use for a lot of times for anxiety, but really any kind of strong feeling. And so we have the kids do some deep breathing just because we're trying to bring that brain unflipped. But it's a great strategy because it's using your senses. You don't need to have anything with you. But I'm going to look around and for 5 things that I see, and I'm going to say them to myself. And the little kids, we have them say it out loud just because they're little and we're helping them. But like, okay, I see Tess. I see the TV. I see the couch. I see Fergie, I see Tilly up here, 4 things that I can feel. And so I'm going to go through and find 4 things, and I'm going to feel them, and I'm going to say them out loud. 3 things that I can hear, 2 things that I can smell, and unless you're eating, 1 thing that you can taste is about all. So you can do those in any order other than really the smell and the taste usually are 2 in 1, although sometimes in a classroom there is a lot of smells. So especially as those kids get a little older. I shared this with some kids recently, and they did an activity on it, and they loved it because I think we have to give ourselves permission to take care of ourselves because we are in such a, you know, our societies, we have to go, go, go and do. And we have to allow ourselves to rest and take care of ourselves. So I love that there are 9 types of rest. One is time away. I just need to go away. At school, when a kid's stressed, we tell them go get a drink of water, go take a walk, go do something, go away from what's upsetting you. Permission to not be helpful. Sometimes I don't want to do the dishes. You can do the dishes, and I'm going to do this. That's okay. To do something unproductive, you know, I'm doing a puzzle on my phone because cats are jerks. I can't do a puzzle in real life. But is that productive? No, but it's a way of relaxing, and it's okay. Connection to art and nature, solitude to recharge, and our introvert kids and adults need more of that. A break from responsibility, that stillness to decompress. There's so much noise. Sometimes we just have to shut it down. A safe space and alone time at home. And we need these. Adults need them too. And so find time. And if you're a planner person, schedule it in if that helps. For the hour on Tuesday from 2 to 3, I'm going to do something unproductive. And I'm going to do it because self-care is important for me, and it's okay. And you can let people know, I'm going to just go do this puzzle and give me a little space. And I know it's like with the phone, the kids don't leave you alone. I get it. But if you if you let them know and ask them, a lot of times they will do their best to try to give it to you. So these are a lot of the strategies that I work with kids. Time and space, time and space, time and space. I say this to teachers all the time. If a kid's upset, leave them alone. Just allow them to be. I try to have all my classrooms to have a cozy corner, which right now with COVID, we can't. But a place where kids can just go and not be seen. We've used refrigerator boxes, cut little windows with those X-Acto knives so you can see in, but the kids have a sense of you can't see me, you're not looking at me. And that's great. I had a kiddo, he's probably in his 20s, and he gave permission to me years ago to use his name, but he did something called Drew time. His name's Drew. He got home from school and he had some sensory issues. And every day, mom learned you can't make a doctor's or a dentist appointment for right after school. You can't go to the grocery store right after school. He was done. When school was over, he needed to go home. And he figured that this was a 3rd grader. I was so proud of his self-awareness because I think a lot of adults don't necessarily have these skills that he had as an 8-year-old. But he literally stripped down to his underwear, got into his bed, shut all the lights out, and took about 30 minutes of Drew time, just calming himself down. And then he could get up, then he could go to the dentist, then he could go to the doctor, he could go to the grocery store, but he needed to have that downtime. And so knowing your kids and knowing what they need is really helpful. Reading is great for a lot of kids. For the younger kids, story time online is great because, again, we're trying to give them the time away. So this is different than you reading to them, which is vitally important, but just we want them to learn how to calm themselves down and be alone. Art, creativity, those are great. I have a nephew who's 30 now who he was born during the first Gulf War, and my brother was in the 82nd Airborne, so he was over in Afghanistan or Kuwait, I guess, when Jake was born. And they had a Nix was probably 18 months old when Jake was born. And my sister-in-law has always said that it was really stressful for her to have a very active toddler and a kind of a colicky baby. And she thinks that a lot of his anxiety came from that time, but he calmed with baths. So there were days that, he got 4 or 5 baths because he was melting, and putting him in a tub, that helped him. So water play, water tables. Obviously, this kid at a lake is being supervised, but with him, she would close the shower curtain so that, honey, don't lick the keyboard. She would close it so that he couldn't see her, but she could supervise. You are going to mess the computer up. And so find a way that you could safely do that if that helps. Swinging is huge. That vestibular sense, I'm not an OT, but it helps with self-regulation. It helps know where your body is in space. It helps for planning. So that is a great way for kids to calm down. I know after meltdowns, a lot of times when I was working in SED, I would take the kid out and just let them swing for 15 minutes or something. And they were then able to regroup and come back in. The picture of the turtle is a great strategy that we teach little kids, because when they are impulsive, they tend to react with hitting or pushing. And so we talk about, what does a turtle do when they're stressed? Well, they pull their head and their arms and their legs and their tail into their shell. Well, obviously we don't have a shell, but the goal is to teach them, like, if I'm mad at Shauna and I'm looking at her and maybe she's laughing with a friend, having a good time, I'm not going to calm down because I'm looking at her and I'm getting more angry. So I need to look away. So I'm going to pull my head into my shell, and I'm going to tighten up my arms as tight as possible. Because if you try this, if your muscles are totally tight, I can barely move my arms. So impulsively hitting at someone, which is going to get me in big trouble, I can't do it. And so we teach the little ones, and sometimes a little older because they don't have the skill, but pull your arms in, tighten them up, tuck your head in, turn and walk away. And, sometimes we have agreements with kindergarten and first grade teachers that when the kid is turtling, they may just need to walk to the drinking fountain and just let them. And they go out there, and when they're at the drinking fountain, at some of my schools, we have pictures of some coping strategies that they can do, because visuals, when you're not a reader or a good reader, are helpful. But that gets kids out of trouble, because then you get into that cycle of, well, I was mad, so I hit him because I didn't think. And so that's a great one. And then this little kid on the right, I don't think what I'm going to assign to him is what is truly happening. I think he's trying to flex his muscles. But one of the strategies that we teach the kids is to out tension the tension. So if I'm feeling tension, one, we want kids to know where they're feeling it in their body. But if their lids are flipped, they can't tell you that. So we tell them just to kind of go through their muscle groups, tighten it up, hold it for 10, then shake it out. Then do it again, shake it out. Do it with your legs. Do it with
isn't that a coping strategy that's taught to the kids too? Because Alistair went over it's called tight loose, or tight something. So, and I know JCMH, Jeffco Jefferson Center, has been teaching our kids, so that when we hear those words, it's another one of those coping strategies.
I've always called it out tension the tension. I've heard it called those other things, but it is the same thing. So it's just, and then once they're calm and they're back in their brains, they're accessing their prefrontal cortex, we can then process calmly with them. How are you feeling? And see, we want them to develop what we call early warning signs. So, where were you feeling the tension? Well, my stomach was getting tight. I noticed my heart was beating faster. My face was getting hot. My head started to hurt. My stomach started getting butterflies, whatever it is. Because what we want them to start noticing is when this happens, I'm feeling this, and this strategy helps. But we also have to let kids know that not every strategy is going to work every time. And it's okay if it didn't work this time because it's worked these other times and it'll probably work again. But nothing works all the time. I mean, sometimes you're just going to have a crappy day and maybe you just need to cry, and that's okay. But if we set up the expectation that this is going to work every time, you're going to lose them because it's not. Nothing's going to work all the time. And so, but the goal is that we start helping them to see, I was feeling this, I tried this, and then I felt this after I did it. And then maybe if they're not feeling 100% back to themselves, maybe they want to try something else and just keep, practicing. But when Shauna was asking me about being on the PTA board, she was saying that she had realized that she kept hearing the term coping strategies and use your coping strategies, but she didn't know what they were. And so how do you cue your kids if you don't know, which is why we are doing things like this so that,
This is
you know,
exactly why we're doing things like this. I felt like an idiot. So 2 years ago, my kids in high school, I've known Casey and Eileen all this time. I was really active in school to the point of the kids actually thought I was the assistant principal because I was there so often. So, and everywhere in the school. And every time my daughter would have a meltdown, so poor Morgan, I pick on her and all this, she would have this meltdown, I'd be like, come on now, use your coping strategies, because I knew that they were learning them and I knew what they were learning. I just didn't know what the coping strategies were. And I didn't realize it until I went to a program actually with Alistair like 2 years ago. And then I started telling Casey, oh my gosh, if I don't know what they are, think about all of these other parents who don't know what they are. So if we can't do this and demonstrate it with our own kids, boy, we've really missed the boat because our kids are still with us more than they're at school. So we have to do them too. And amazingly, I have found that they're very effective for me as well.
and we need to let them know that we're doing them because we have to model them. I mean, a lot of times kids think, oh, adults have it so easy. They grow up, they have everything's going for them. But that's not my life. And I don't think that's anybody's life. And so I think it's okay to, tell kids, oh, I just had a hard phone call. I'm going to go take a little walk and take some deep breaths, and I'll come back to help you with this math in just a few minutes. But I think we have to model us using the coping strategies as well, because I think it's important that kids realize that it's okay. And I also think that we need to let them know that there's nothing wrong with struggling. Struggling is how we grow, and that we're going to have struggles, and there are going to be times that things don't feel good and they don't work out, and it's okay, and we're going to get better. But we have to let them know that those kind of things are totally, totally fine. Um,
Casey, I
and-
also wanted to, one of the things we talk about in the suicide prevention training too, is looking at things through somebody else's lens, your kid's lens. I mean, we know that we went through the boyfriend girlfriend breakup or friend breakups or those kind of things in school, or even now when they're distance from friends, which is kind of like a breakup. We went through that ourselves already, and we have a tendency to not acknowledge our kids going through it. I mean, they think it's the end of the world. We know that we got through it and we're just fine, and they will too, but they don't know that.
right.
And that's something that we often forget to listen to our kids, no matter the age, and look at things through their eyes, through their lens, and how they see the world.
Right. And I have a couple slides that might be helpful for that in just a sec. Self-talk is a strategy that we work with kids on all the time. I was joking around with some of my kids at Sheridan Green when we were in person, because I think it's really important to look for the silver lining all the time. I don't want to get into the toxic positivity, like everything is wonderful, because frankly, right now, there's a lot that sucks. And it's okay to acknowledge that things are really hard right now. But we can also say, my dad's 92 and a half. I get to Zoom with him now. So he lives in Boston. It stinks that I can't go see him, but at least I can see him on the computer instead of talking to him on the phone. So we were talking about self-talk in, I guess it was my 4th grade class. And I said, what I'm thankful for with these masks is I have noticed that I talk to myself through the grocery store. I self-talk like, oh, I want to make bup and I need but and blah, blah. Well, nobody can see that my mouth is moving. So there's one of the silver linings. But we have to teach them these self-talk things like this is hard, but I've done hard things. I might not be able to control this, but I can control how I respond. I haven't figured this out yet. That whole growth mindset is really good stuff. um, this challenge is here to teach me something. It's okay that I don't know everything. Boy, working with gifted kids, perfectionism, it's so big. It's okay to not know everything, especially when you're a kid. Nobody knows everything, and it's okay. All I need to do is take one step at a time, breathe, and then do the next right thing. Just really try to help them. And the kids like us are really, really hard on themselves. So flipping the scene is one of the strategies that we talk about. So we ask kids, and the high school kids do a beautiful job with this, because they're really used to giving their friends advice, but they don't give themselves the same grace. So imagine the advice that you'd have for friends when they came to you with the same problem, and then give it to yourself. We have to acknowledge our own imperfections and not expect ourselves to be perfect, and to tolerate that we screw up. And it's okay. But this is something that when I worked in high school, the kids were like, I tried that. It felt really, really, really weird. It's like the first time when you start doing relaxation stuff, it feels like, or people that do meditation. I have ADD. I don't do meditation. I can't figure out how to do it for more than 20 seconds. But this is something that with my high school kids, especially the girls, because they're really good at giving each other helpful advice, but they're so hard on themselves. And then also that perspective. If you think back to your elementary days or your high school days, you might remember, oh, I had a big fight with so-and-so. But do you remember the details? Maybe. But I don't. I don't remember most of the stuff. And so we use physical issues with this. Okay, you fell and hurt your knee. How does it feel right now? How do you think it's going to feel in 5 minutes after we clean it up and bandage it? It's probably still going to hurt a little bit. What about in an hour? Well, most cuts and scrapes feel better in an hour, but the end of the day. And so try to build that perspective with physical things and then talk about emotional stuff. Some things are going to hurt for a really, really long time. Kids who lose a parent or a grandparent or a significant person in their life dies when they're young, it's probably still always going to have some pain associated with it, but you're going to be able to manage. So we want them to have that perspective that right now it hurts a lot, but it's not always going to hurt. Right now, things are hard. Kids are missing their friends. I think the kids who've transitioned to higher grade levels, my 5th graders who've gone to 6th grade, I've heard the same about the 8th graders that have gone to 9th grade. This is a really hard time to switch levels. Again, we can look at if we're creative and do things differently, it helps. I've been able to do Zooms with some of my kids who were struggling with the transition to middle school with the person in my job at North Arvada, for example. And so trying to build that relationship, because relationship is what matters so much in school. You already have relationships with your kids. But if you're a kid going into a new school and you don't know the adults, it's really hard for them to support you because they don't know you, they don't know how to help you. So there are different ways that we can do this, but worry is never going to change anything. It just makes you feel lousy. And so that perspective, and this is something that we talk about in the QPR, the suicide prevention training as well, is that perspective that, yeah, this hurts and it's going to hurt, but it's not going to hurt at some point. And so it's okay to move forward. If you've never heard Brene Brown, who's a social worker, works at the University of Houston, multiple books, she's got podcasts. She's just brilliant. I absolutely adore her. But I love this quote: when someone spews something really hurtful, don't pick it up and hold it and rub it into your heart and snuggle with it and carry it around for a long time. Don't even put energy into kicking it to the curb. You've got to see it, step over it, or go around it and keep going. So we have to, people are going to say lousy things to you. They are. When we're having a hard time, we tend to take things out on the people that we know are going to love us no matter what, which is why when kids have a bad day at school, they tend to take it out on you when you get home because they know you're going to love them, even if they are really nasty to you, sometimes abusive, verbally, typically, but sometimes more. They know that you're always going to love them. But we have to teach ourselves that just because someone unloaded on us, we don't have to hold on to it. We can just say, "Oh, that's icky," and go around it. Kind of like seeing the dog poop on the sidewalk. Oops, I'm just going to avoid that. I love this. These are, I think, really helpful things that I just like to get into as many presentations as I do. The one on the left, the positive words that can change how you see your child. And I do it a lot with teachers. If you look at the words on the left, they tend to have more of a negative connotation. But if you look at the words across from them on the right-hand column, that maybe your wild kid is just energetic and creative. Instead of dramatic, maybe they're expressive. And so it really helps with changing those negative connotations to more positive things. I really get frustrated when girls are called bossy because boys aren't. Boys are called a leader. And so sometimes there are gender things thrown in there. And we have to build our girls' leadership skills because they're going to be in leadership roles. And then I always, one of the things is parents are like, I'm so sick of saying, how was your day, and getting fine. So these are different questions on how can you ask kids, like, what was a problem you tried to solve today? Different ways to try to get them talking, because you want to have those conversations with them so that you can know them and know what's going on with them. So like, what did you do that was creative? Why was today a good day? Did you like your lunch? So things that, did you like your lunch can still be yes or no, but things that try to get more than a yes or no thing. What rule was hard to follow? What felt unfair? That's one that I like because that tends to get kids talking. And what tends to feel unfair for a lot of kids is group consequences. We had to be quiet in the lunchroom because some kids wouldn't stop talking. I hate that. And I always try to work to get rid of those, but those kind of things. And then you can say, yeah, I always hated those too. And then that builds that relationship between you and them too, because you are on the same page as them. Self-advocacy is a skill that we work hard with kids on, but you have to know yourself to know what you need and then know how to get it. So I call it the research me search part of our lessons, where we talk about what kind of a learner are you, what helps you, how can you ask for what you need. Um, so if you're getting hangry and you've kind of, that was test burping, and you're processing through, you know, I I know I start feeling this and a snack helps. So how do you ask for it? If it's not snack time, if you're in a class that doesn't have snack time and you know that you can't focus right now because you're hungry, how could you appropriately ask your teacher to be able to get that need met? Or I need a brain break, or something brought up something and I'm having a hard time. I need a little time and space, or there's too much sensory. A lot of kids process out loud, they need to talk. Our younger readers, they read out loud because hearing it and seeing it helps with the comprehension. But if that's too much sensory input for me, I'm not learning. So how can you do things like give kids whisper phones so that they're reading into this and then they can hear themselves, but I don't need to hear them? Or maybe I need headphones, or maybe I need the lights turned down. And then we work a whole lot on how to be assertive and not aggressive. Because if I'm really struggling and I'm hangry and you're my safe person, I might yell at you to give me a snack instead of self advocating that, you know what, I'm really grumpy and I think some food would help. So that's a skill that we work hard with kids on. And you've heard of relationship red flags. Well, here are some green ones. So, practicing self-care, letting kids know that you're doing self-care. I'm going to go take a bath, and I tell kids when I get home from work, even pre-COVID, I wash off work. I get in the shower and I wash off work. And sometimes I'll, use the little thing and I'm saying, stress, go away. And I tell them that I'm doing that. And, you get some weird looks, but then they'll come back and say, I tried that. I had that fight with my friend and I took a shower and I kind of scrubbed off and I felt better. So figuring out those kind of things helps, but having long-standing friendships, which are really hard right now because it's hard to see people. I don't know if you all know that Zoom is free for everyone for 40 minutes. And I have kids that when it cuts you off, they just send another link and they get back on. So kids can have time with their friends. I do something called social time where whoever wants to get on Fridays, we've done it Friday because I had a feeling we would go remote. And then I thought elementary might be like middle and high school with asynchronous days. But I do 45 minutes for different grade levels, put them in breakout rooms. It's just a chance for them to be silly and talk with their friends and be a kid, especially for the only kids, or if there's an age difference. Your teenage kid might not want to play Monopoly with your second grader, but maybe they could play things. I figured out how to play Blockus over Zoom. And the kid just told me which piece. And, we did a lot of kind of this so that they could look at their pieces, but we figured it out and we can be creative and find different things. But finding healthy hobbies, helping them to explore things. And, I was the kid that my mom would sign me up for different things. And I'm an introvert. I didn't want to go with people I didn't know. And that was hard. But she'd make me go and I would go. And a lot of times I liked it. But Tess, it's hard to, there we go. Now I can see where the arrow is. So those are some good things. And then we have nice relationships. I love this. On particularly rough days when I'm sure I can't possibly endure, I like to remind myself that my track record for bad days so far is 100%, and that's pretty good. Because even those days that felt really, really, really awful, you made it through, and the next day you have a chance for things to be maybe a little bit better. And some things are still going to be bad the next day, and that's okay. Again, we have to normalize that not everything's fixed in a 30-minute sitcom. Sometimes things take a long time, and sometimes there's reoccurring issues and they last for a long time. But every day is a good day that you make it through. I used to work in my first job other than babysitting was working in a factory that made athletic protective equipment. And I think me and my other friend from high school brought the average age down to about 65. So I had all these great grandmothers. And one of them, but they just had these really great little wisdoms. And I'd say, "How are you today, Joe?" And she'd say, "Every day above ground is a good day." And she, here's this woman working. She was 76 years old, still working in a factory, making things like jock straps. And, she didn't have enough money to retire, but what a great perspective. I mean, as my 16-year-old self yeah, every day above ground is a good day, even if it's hard and it stinks. And then I love this because for me, animals are a passion, but I like to play on words too. Your stress level is too high. Follow me to the lab, and you could substitute whatever is your passion. We have to find what works for us and help kids find what works for them. I love to do photography. So if I'm really stressed out, I'll put the dogs in the car, throw the camera in, and we'll go look for wildlife because I like to take pictures of animals. I go and I volunteer down at National Mill Dog, 87 miles each way, but it's a passion, and so it helps me. So I think that's really important. So Shauna, why don't we stop the recording here?
Yes, ma'am. So I hope everybody has enjoyed this. We are going to stop the recording so we can have a more personal conversation. And Casey, thank you. Thank you. Thank you. I'm always surprised when I learn even more from you, but I did again. So
Good.
thank you. We're so grateful for you. And you are a wonderful, wonderful person.